In the year 970 BCE, a young man ascended to the throne of Israel, who would become the wisest and most conflicted ruler in human history. Solomon wasn't just a king. He was a philosopher, a poet, a judge, and ultimately a cautionary tale about the limits of human wisdom. He built a temple that became the spiritual center of an entire civilization. He wrote proverbs that still guide how we think about virtue and vice. He accumulated wealth beyond imagination and experienced pleasures most people can only dream about. And then he wrote Ecclesiastes, one of the most haunting books ever composed, declaring that everything he'd achieved was meaningless, vanity, a chasing after wind. But here's what makes Solomon truly extraordinary. He didn't just pursue wisdom as an intellectual exercise. He tested every philosophy through lived experience. He tried pleasure, tried wealth, tried power, tried knowledge, and found them all insufficient. He asked questions that still haunt us today. Can wisdom solve the problem of mortality? Does knowledge lead to happiness or despair? Can you have everything and still find it's not enough? What does it mean to live well when death makes everything temporary? Most philosophers before him tried to answer these questions with theories. Solomon did something different. He lived out every answer and reported back on what he found. He showed that intelligence without purpose becomes torture, that pleasure without meaning becomes emptiness, that achievement without permanence becomes vanity, that life without transcendence becomes unbearable. If you're enjoying these stories, I'd really appreciate a quick like or even a subscribe. It helps more than you know. I'm always curious where you're listening from, so drop a comment with what city you're from and what time it is there. Love seeing our little global community connect through these stories. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. We're going to explore why Solomon's wisdom led him to the edge of despair and what that teaches us about the human condition. Part 1. The gift that changed everything. When God offers you anything, let me start with the moment that defined Solomon's entire life. And it begins with a choice so profound that most people would freeze in terror at having to make it. Picture this. Solomon's just become king. He's young, probably early 20s, and he's terrified. His father David was a warrior, a poet, a man who killed giants and built an empire. How do you follow that? David's life was legendary. He went from shepherd boy to king. He killed Goliath when he was just a teenager. He wrote psalms that captured the full range of human emotion, from ecstatic praise to agonized doubt. He was called a man after God's own heart. And now, Solomon has to follow that. He wasn't the warrior his father was. He didn't have David's charisma or his military genius. He was the younger son who wasn't supposed to inherit the throne. His older brother, Adonijah, tried to seize power before David died. There was court intrigue, political maneuvering, bloodshed. Solomon's first acts as king involved executing his rivals. His brother Adonijah was killed. Joab, David's general, who'd supported Adonijah, was killed at the altar where he'd sought sanctuary. Shimei, who'd cursed David, was executed after breaking the terms of his house arrest. Solomon secured his throne through calculated violence. This wasn't a gentle philosopher king ascending peacefully to power. This was a young man eliminating threats through ruthless political calculation. And he knew it. He knew that wisdom meant seeing clearly how power works. how threats must be neutralized, how mercy can be weakness when you're consolidating a kingdom. He understood the dark side of ruling before he even asked God for wisdom. So when he goes to Gibeon to offer sacrifices, he's already compromised. He's already made choices that weigh on him. He's already learned that being king means doing things that keep you up at night. That night, God appears to him in a dream and says something that's never been offered to anyone before or since. Ask for whatever you want me to give you. Stop and think about that. The creator of the universe is offering you a blank check. Anything. No limits, no conditions. Just ask. What would you choose? Most people, if they're honest, would grab for something immediate and tangible. Wealth beyond measure, power to defeat any enemy, knowledge of the future so you could never be surprised, immortality, perfect health, the love of everyone around you. Solomon asks for wisdom, but not wisdom in general. He's very specific. He says, "Give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong. For who's able to govern this great people of yours?" Notice the humility in that request. Who's able to govern this great people? He's acknowledging his inadequacy. He's recognizing that the responsibility he's been given is beyond his natural capacity. But notice also what kind of wisdom he's asking for. Not wisdom to understand the cosmos. Not wisdom to achieve enlightenment. Not wisdom to write great literature or make scientific discoveries. He's asking for wisdom to judge between people, to see into human nature, to understand motivation, to distinguish between truth and lies, between justice and injustice, between righteousness and wickedness. This is forensic wisdom, psychological wisdom, moral wisdom, the ability to see what's really happening beneath the surface of human interaction. God's pleased with this request. The text says, "The Lord was pleased that Solomon had asked for this. So God said to him, 'Since you've asked for this, and not for long life or wealth for yourself, nor have asked for the death of your enemies, but for discernment in administering justice, I will do what you've asked. I'll give you a wise and discerning heart, so that there'll never have been anyone like you, nor will there ever be. Never been anyone like you. Never will be anyone like you. Solomon's going to be the wisest human who ever lived. Not just wise, but uniquely wise, supernaturally wise. But then God adds something Solomon didn't ask for. Moreover, I'll give you what you haven't asked for, both wealth and honor, so that in your lifetime you'll have no equal among kings. And if you walk in obedience to me and keep my decrees and commands, as David your father did, I'll give you a long life. Everything, the complete package, wisdom, wealth, honor, and potentially long life. All the things humans strive for, all given as a gift. This seems like pure blessing. But here's where the tragedy begins planting its seeds. Because Solomon's about to discover something that'll haunt the rest of his life. The more you understand about human nature, the harder it becomes to bear. The more you see through people's pretenses, the lonelier you become. The more you understand about reality, the more you realize how little control you actually have. Wisdom's going to be both gift and curse. It'll make him the greatest king. It'll also make him one of the saddest men who ever lived. The first famous story about Solomon's wisdom involves 2 women and a baby. It happens early in his reign. 2 prostitutes come before him. They live in the same house. Both gave birth around the same time. One baby died in the night. Now both women claim the living baby is theirs. No witnesses. No physical evidence. No way to determine biological relationship in an era before DNA testing. Just two conflicting testimonies from women whose profession makes them unreliable witnesses in the eyes of most men. Everyone's watching to see how the new king will handle this. It's a test case. Whatever he decides will establish his reputation as a judge. Solomon listens to both women. One says, "My lord, this woman and I live in the same house. I had a baby while she was there with me. The third day, after my child was born, this woman also had a baby. We were alone. There was no one in the house but the two of us. During the night, this woman's son died because she lay on him. So she got up in the middle of the night and took my son from my side while I, your servant, was asleep. She put him by her breast and put her dead son by my breast. The next morning, I got up to nurse my son, and he was dead. But when I looked at him closely in the morning light, I saw that it wasn't the baby I'd born." The other woman says, "No, the living one's my son, the dead one's yours." They argue back and forth. The same accusations repeated, the same denials. No new information emerges. Solomon sits on his throne, watching. He can see everything. He can see which woman's genuinely distraught and which one's performing distress. He can see which one's focused on the baby and which one's focused on winning the argument. He can read their body language, their micro expressions, the things they reveal without knowing they're revealing them. But he can't just announce his conclusion. No one else can see what he sees. If he simply declares one woman the mother, the loser will say he's being arbitrary or has been bribed. He needs a solution that reveals the truth publicly, that forces the truth to display itself so everyone can see it. So he says, "Bring me a sword." The sword is brought. Then he gives an order that makes everyone in the court gasp. Cut the living child in two and give half to one and half to the other. It's monstrous. It's the worst possible solution. It's literally the definition of injustice, punishing the innocent to avoid making a choice. But Solomon's not serious. He's testing. He's creating a scenario that'll force each woman to reveal her true motivation. The response is immediate. One woman says, "Yes, my lord, do it. Neither I nor she shall have him. Cut him in two." The other woman screams, "Please, my lord, give her the living baby. Don't kill him." And Solomon knows. The real mother would rather lose her child to another woman than see him die. The false claimant doesn't actually care about the child's welfare. She just doesn't want the other woman to win. Solomon says, "Give the living baby to the first woman. Don't kill him. She's his mother." The text says, "When all Israel heard the verdict the king had given, they held the king in awe because they saw that he'd wisdom from God to administer justice." This story's told as triumph. Look how wise Solomon is. Look how he saw through the situation and delivered justice. But let's think about what Solomon just learned about human nature. He learned that a woman will watch another woman's baby be cut in half rather than admit she's lying. That jealousy and pride can make someone prefer death to defeat. That humans are capable of maintaining pretense even when a child's life hangs in the balance. This is his first major public case, and it's already showing him the darkness in the human heart. And this isn't an exception. This is normal. This is what people are like when their interests conflict. Over the following years, Solomon hears thousands of cases. He sees every variation of human behavior. He sees how people lie to gain advantage, how they betray friends for profit, how they destroy others out of envy. how they rationalize evil, how they deceive themselves while deceiving others. He becomes famous throughout the known world for his wisdom. Kings and queens travel hundreds of miles to consult him. The Queen of Sheba comes from the ends of the earth, bringing gifts of spices, gold, and precious stones. She tests him with hard questions. The text says, Solomon answered all her questions. Nothing was too hard for the king to explain to her. When she sees his wisdom, his palace, his officials, his offerings, she was overwhelmed. She says, The report I heard in my own country about your achievements and your wisdom is true. But I didn't believe these things until I came and saw with my own eyes. Indeed, not even half was told me. In wisdom and wealth, you far exceeded the report I heard. Solomon's at the peak of his fame. He's everything a king should be. Wise, wealthy, powerful, admired. He's built an empire through diplomacy rather than conquest. He's made Israel the envy of surrounding nations. But here's what nobody talks about. What does it feel like to be the wisest person alive? What's it like to see through every pretense, understand every manipulation, recognize every self-deception? Solomon starts writing Proverbs, thousands of them. The text says he spoke 3,000 Proverbs. We have only a fraction of them preserved in Scripture. But that fraction shows us what he's thinking about. And he's obsessed with fools. Again and again, his Proverbs return to the theme of folly. Like a dog returns to its vomit, so fools repeat their folly. The way of fools seems right to them, but the wise listen to advice. Fools find no pleasure in understanding, but delight in airing their own opinions. As a dog returns to its vomit, so fools repeat their folly. Why is he so focused on fools? Because he's surrounded by them. He's the wisest man alive, which means everyone else, from his perspective, is operating with incomplete understanding, making preventable mistakes, walking into obvious traps. He can see the consequences of their choices before they can. He can predict how their pride will destroy them, how their greed will corrupt them, how their lust will trap them, how their anger will isolate them. And he can't stop them. That's the unbearable part. He can warn them. He can advise them. He can even command them as king. But he can't make them understand what he understands. He can't give them his vision. He can't force them to see what he sees. So he watches them destroy themselves, over and over. The same patterns, the same mistakes, the same tragic outcomes. And all he can do is document it in Proverbs, hoping that maybe future generations will learn what this generation won't. He writes, "With much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief." This isn't philosophical speculation. It's autobiography. He's reporting on his own experience, the burden of seeing clearly what others can't see, the loneliness of being the only person in the room who understands what's really happening, the frustration of being unable to prevent disasters you can see coming. Think about what this means practically. You're Solomon. An official comes to you with a plan for a new building project. To him, it seems brilliant. He's worked on it for months. He's excited about it. He thinks it'll solve multiple problems. You can see in 30 seconds exactly why it'll fail. The budget's unrealistic. The timeline's impossible. The assumptions about materials are wrong. The political support isn't there. It's going to collapse, probably taking the official's career with it. You tell him this, gently, because you're wise enough to know that crushing someone's hopes requires delicacy. You point out the flaws. You suggest modifications. You try to redirect his enthusiasm towards something achievable. He nods politely. He thanks you for your input. And then he proceeds with his original plan anyway, because he can't see what you see. To him, your objections are just pessimism or excessive caution. He thinks you're being unnecessarily negative. 6 months later, the project collapses exactly as you predicted. Resources are wasted. People are disappointed. The officials humiliated. And you're standing there thinking, I told you this would happen. Why didn't you listen? But you already know why. Because he couldn't see what you saw. Because humans have to learn through experience what they can't learn through instruction. Because wisdom can't be transferred. It has to be earned through suffering. This happens with everything. Personal relationships, military decisions, economic policies, diplomatic negotiations. You can see the outcomes clearly. You warn people. They don't listen. Everything happens exactly as you predicted. And you're left feeling like Cassandra, cursed to see the future clearly, but unable to prevent it. This is the first layer of Solomon's grief, the loneliness of superior understanding, the isolation of being the only person who can see what's coming, the frustration of being right but powerless to make others see that you're right. But it gets worse. Because Solomon doesn't just understand human foolishness, he understands human evil. And that's harder to bear. He sees how people hurt each other, not accidentally, not through ignorance, but deliberately. How they destroy others out of envy. How they betray trust for advantage. How they use their power to oppress the weak. How they lie to profit. How they corrupt justice for bribes. How they abuse the vulnerable. And he can't stop it all. He's king, so he has more power than most. But even kings can't be everywhere. Even kings can't prevent every injustice. Even kings can't change human nature. He writes about this constantly. Again, I looked and saw all the oppression that was taking place under the sun. I saw the tears of the oppressed, and they've no comforter. Power was on the side of their oppressors, and they've no comforter. The repetition of no comforter is heartbreaking. He's seeing people suffer, seeing their tears, recognizing that power's being used against them rather than for them, and acknowledging that there's no one to help them, even him, even the wise king. He can't comfort everyone who's suffering. He continues, and I declared that the dead, who'd already died, are happier than the living, who are still alive. But better than both is the one who's never been born, who hasn't seen the evil that's done under the sun. This is depression talking. This is someone who's seen so much darkness that he's questioning whether existence itself is good, whether being born is a blessing or a curse. And this is coming from the wisest, richest, most powerful man alive. Someone who has every advantage. Someone who's achieved everything. Someone who should be the happiest person in the world. But he's not happy. He's grieving. He's grieving because wisdom has shown him things he can't unsee. Truth that can't be unknown. Patterns that can't be unrecognized. He writes, "For with much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief." Let that sink in. The gift God gave him, the thing everyone envies, the thing that makes him unique in human history, is making him sad. Not because the gift itself is bad, but because what the gift reveals is unbearable. Wisdom shows you reality without the filters that protect normal people from despair. It shows you humans as they really are, not as you wish they were. It shows you the world as it actually functions, not as you hope it functions. And reality, when seen clearly, without comforting illusions, is hard to bear. But Solomon doesn't stop with wisdom about human nature. He pursues knowledge about everything. 1 Kings tells us he spoke 3,000 proverbs, and his songs numbered 1,005. He spoke about plant life, from the cedar of Lebanon to the hyssop that grows out of walls. He spoke about animals and birds, reptiles and fish. He's trying to understand the entire created order. He's conducting what we'd now call scientific research. He's cataloging, categorizing, seeking the patterns that explain how reality works. He's studying botany, from the massive cedars that tower over Lebanon to the tiny hyssop that grows in cracks in walls. He's studying zoology, animals, birds, reptiles, fish. He's trying to understand the principles that govern life in all its forms. This is systematic investigation. This is the scientific method before it had that name. Observe, categorize, look for patterns, develop theories about how things work. And here's what he discovers. Knowledge doesn't satisfy. The more you know, the more you realize how much you don't know. Every answer generates 10 new questions. Understanding gets more complex, not simpler. The universe doesn't yield its secrets easily. He writes in Ecclesiastes, "I applied my mind to study and to explore by wisdom all that's done under the heavens." What a heavy burden God has laid on mankind. I've seen all the things that are done under the sun. All of them are meaningless, a chasing after wind. What's crooked can't be straightened. What's lacking can't be counted. Notice the progression here. He applied his mind. He studied. He explored with wisdom. He saw all the things done under the sun. He did the work. He pursued knowledge systematically, thoroughly, comprehensively. And his conclusion isn't, "I found the answers." His conclusion isn't, "Now I understand everything." His conclusion is, it's all meaningless. It's chasing after wind. What's crooked can't be straightened. What's lacking can't be counted. What does that last line mean? It means the problems you discover through wisdom can't be fixed through wisdom. The flaws in creation, the brokenness in human nature, the injustices built into social systems, you can see them clearly, but seeing them doesn't give you power to correct them. What's crooked can't be straightened. Some things are just broken, and wisdom can identify the brokenness, but can't repair it. What's lacking can't be counted. Some absences are so fundamental that you can't even fully catalog them. You know something essential is missing, but you can't quite grasp what it is or how to supply it. This is devastating. Solomon's been given the gift everyone wants: unlimited wisdom, unlimited resources to pursue knowledge, unlimited time to think deeply about reality. And instead of finding enlightenment and satisfaction, he finds emptiness and frustration. He's learning what modern philosophers call the knowledge problem. The more you know, the more you realize the limits of knowledge. Every field of study reveals how little we understand. Every answer opens up vistas of new questions. The universe of things we don't know expands faster than the universe of things we do know. Isaac Asimov illustrated this with his metaphor of the sphere of knowledge. As your knowledge grows, it's like a sphere expanding. But the surface area of that sphere, the boundary between what you know and what you don't know, grows even faster. The more you learn, the more you encounter your ignorance. Solomon's discovering this through bitter experience. He thought wisdom would bring understanding, and understanding would bring peace. Instead, wisdom brings confusion, and understanding brings anguish. Because what he understands now is that humans are fundamentally limited. We're not capable of grasping ultimate truth. We can't see the whole picture. We're like ants trying to understand a city. We can observe our immediate surroundings, but the larger patterns and purposes are beyond our comprehension. Contemporary philosophers might say Solomon's experiencing what Kant called the limits of pure reason. Reason can take you far, but it can't take you all the way. There are questions reason can't answer because they're beyond the scope of human cognitive capacity. Or what Gödel proved mathematically, that within any logical system, there are truths that can't be proven within that system. You need something outside the system to validate the system. Humans can't validate human reasoning using only human reasoning. We need an external reference point. But Solomon got there 3,000 years earlier, without formal philosophy or mathematical proofs. He learned it through lived experience, through pushing wisdom to its absolute limit and discovering that the limit exists, that there are things beyond human understanding, that knowledge alone doesn't provide meaning or peace or purpose. So here's Solomon, maybe 10 or 15 years into his reign. He's the wisest man alive. He's accumulated knowledge about everything. He's solved thousands of legal cases. He's advised on political matters, economic matters, diplomatic matters. He's studied the natural world. He's written thousands of proverbs and songs. And he's miserable. Not because life's been cruel to him. It hasn't. Not because he's failed. He hasn't. Not because he lacks anything. He doesn't. He's miserable because wisdom has shown him that wisdom isn't enough. Knowledge has revealed that knowledge doesn't satisfy. Understanding has demonstrated that understanding leaves you more confused about ultimate questions than you were before. This is the first major crisis in Solomon's philosophy, the crisis of insufficient wisdom. The recognition that the very thing you've pursued with everything in you, the thing you've achieved beyond anyone else, doesn't deliver what you hoped it would deliver. Wisdom doesn't lead to happiness. In many ways, it leads to suffering because you see too clearly what others can't see. You understand too much about how broken everything is. You recognize patterns of futility that others miss. The question now is, what do you do with that recognition? Do you despair? Do you give up on wisdom? Do you try something else? Solomon's going to try something else. If knowledge doesn't satisfy, maybe pleasure will. If understanding leads to grief, maybe he should stop trying to understand and just enjoy himself. He's about to conduct the most thorough experiment in human satisfaction ever attempted. And the results are going to be even more disturbing than his conclusions about wisdom. Part 2. The pleasure experiment. When you can have everything. Now we reach the part of Solomon's story that most people find either fascinating or scandalous. After discovering that wisdom leads to sorrow, Solomon decides to test whether pleasure leads to happiness. And he doesn't test this halfway. He has unlimited resources, unlimited power, and unlimited access. He's going to pursue pleasure systematically, scientifically, to see if it can provide the meaning that wisdom couldn't. He writes in Ecclesiastes, "I said to myself, 'Come now, I'll test you with pleasure to find out what's good.' But that also proved to be meaningless. 'Laughter,' I said, is madness, and what does pleasure accomplish? But that's the conclusion. Before reaching it, he tries everything, and I mean everything. Let me walk through what he does, because it's important to understand the scope and thoroughness of his experiment. First, he pursues pleasure through wine and entertainment. He says, I tried cheering myself with wine and embracing folly, my mind still guiding me with wisdom. I wanted to see what was good for people to do under the heavens during the few days of their lives. Notice that crucial phrase, my mind still guiding me with wisdom. He's not getting drunk and losing control. He's not becoming an alcoholic who can't function. He's deliberately pursuing pleasure while maintaining enough mental distance to observe what it does to him, how it makes him feel, whether it provides lasting satisfaction. This is important. He's treating pleasure as a philosophical experiment. He's not indulging mindlessly. He's indulging mindfully, watching himself indulge, analyzing his own responses, measuring whether the pleasure delivers what it promises. Think about how unusual this is. Most people who pursue pleasure do it unconsciously. They're not thinking, I'm going to test whether drinking wine makes me happy. They're just drinking because it feels good in the moment, because it provides temporary escape from stress or boredom or pain. Solomon's different. He's conducting research. He's asking, does this work? Does this create lasting happiness? Does this provide meaning? Does this fill the void that wisdom couldn't fill? And what does he discover? That laughter is madness. That pleasure doesn't accomplish anything meaningful. That the euphoria of intoxication is temporary and leaves nothing substantial behind. That you wake up the next morning with a headache and the same empty feeling you had before you drank. The pleasure was real. While it lasted, it was genuinely pleasurable. But it was fleeting. It didn't transform anything. It didn't solve anything. It was like scratching an itch. It feels good for a moment, but the itch comes back, and you're no better off than before. But Solomon doesn't stop with wine and laughter. He moves to achievement. He undertakes great building projects. He builds houses for himself. He plants vineyards. He makes gardens and parks. He plants all kinds of fruit trees. He makes reservoirs to water his groves of flourishing trees. The scale of his building projects is staggering. 1 Kings tells us he took 7 years to build the temple, but 13 years to build his own palace complex. 13 years. Think about the resources that requires: the planning, the labor, the materials, the cost. The temple itself becomes one of the most magnificent structures in the ancient world. It's covered in gold, not just gold leaf, but solid gold covering the inner sanctuary. The walls are carved cedar, decorated with engravings of cherubim, palm trees, and flowers. Massive bronze pillars stand at the entrance. An enormous bronze basin called the sea holds thousands of gallons of water for ceremonial washing. The temple's designed to inspire awe. Everyone who enters should feel small in the presence of something greater than themselves. It's meant to be the dwelling place of God on earth, and it looks like it. It's beautiful, overwhelming, majestic, and it works. When the temple's dedicated, when the Ark of the Covenant is brought in, the text says, when the priests withdrew from the holy place, the cloud filled the temple of the Lord, and the priests couldn't perform their service because of the cloud, for the glory of the Lord filled his temple. Solomon's created something so sacred that even the priests can't function in its presence. He's built a structure that successfully mediates between heaven and earth. This is the ultimate architectural achievement, but it's not enough. So he builds his own palace, even larger and more elaborate. He creates gardens that become legendary, parks full of every kind of tree, fountains, reservoirs, exotic plants. He's creating beauty on a massive scale. He's transforming the landscape of Jerusalem into something that takes visitors' breath away. When the Queen of Sheba visits, she sees all of it. The text says, "When the Queen of Sheba saw all the wisdom of Solomon and the palace he'd built, the food on his table, the seating of his officials, the attending servants in their robes, his cupbearers, and the burnt offerings he made at the temple of the Lord, she was overwhelmed." She was overwhelmed. This isn't just impressive. This is overwhelming. This is architecture and design and organization at a level that exceeds anything she's seen in her travels throughout the known world. Solomon writes about his building projects in Ecclesiastes. "I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself and planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees." He's pursuing what modern psychologists would call self-actualization. He's creating, building, leaving a legacy. This is what great men do. This is how you make your mark on history. This is how you achieve something that'll outlast your lifetime. And it works, in a sense. The temple stands for nearly 400 years until Babylon destroys it. Solomon's reputation as a builder persists for millennia. He's successful by any objective measure. But does it make him happy? Does it fill the void? Does it provide the meaning that wisdom couldn't provide? No. He writes, "Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I'd toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after wind. Nothing was gained under the sun." Past tense. The achievement was real. The pleasure of creation was real while it lasted. But looking back at it, surveying it from the perspective of completion, it all feels empty. It's meaningful in the moment, meaningless in retrospect. Why? Because achievement, like pleasure, is temporary. You build something magnificent, and it brings satisfaction for a while. But then the satisfaction fades. The achievement becomes normal. You get used to it. It's no longer amazing. It's just there. And you're left looking for the next project, the next challenge, the next achievement that might finally be the one that satisfies permanently. But there is no such achievement. Because the problem isn't that you haven't built the right thing yet. The problem's that building things can't solve the fundamental problem of existential emptiness. No external accomplishment can fill an internal void. Solomon's starting to realize this, but he's not ready to accept it yet. So he tries another angle. If achievement doesn't work, maybe accumulation will. He writes, "I amass silver and gold for myself, and the treasure of kings and provinces. I acquired male and female singers, and a harem as well, the delights of a man's heart." Let's talk about the wealth first, because it's almost incomprehensible. 1 Kings says, "The king made silver as common in Jerusalem as stones, and cedar as plentiful as sycamore fig trees in the foothills." Silver as common as stones. Think about that. Silver's a precious metal. It's valuable precisely because it's rare. But Solomon has so much silver that it becomes worthless through abundance. When you can walk down any street and see silver everywhere, it's no longer precious. His income is staggering. 1 Kings tells us, "The weight of the gold that Solomon received yearly was 666 talents. That's about 25 tons of gold per year, plus the revenue from merchants and traders, plus tribute from subject nations, plus gifts from visiting dignitaries. He has 12,000 horses and 1,400 chariots. His fleet of ships trades throughout the known world, bringing back gold, silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks. He drinks from gold cups, using gold for everyday dishes because it's more plentiful than silver. The luxury is beyond anything most people can imagine, and he experiences all of it. He's not just wealthy, he uses his wealth. He lives in opulence. He surrounds himself with beauty and comfort and every physical pleasure money can buy. Does it satisfy? Is it enough? No. He writes in Ecclesiastes, "Whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income." This too is meaningless. This is profound psychological insight. The problem with greed isn't just that it's morally wrong. It's that it doesn't work. It doesn't deliver what it promises. Having money makes you want more money. Having wealth makes you want more wealth. There's no amount that's finally enough. This is what psychologists call the hedonic treadmill. You acquire something, it brings pleasure temporarily. Then you adapt to having it. Then you need more to get the same level of satisfaction. The baseline keeps rising, but the satisfaction level stays the same. Solomon's discovering this through direct experience. He has more wealth than anyone in history up to that point, and it's not satisfying. The initial pleasure of each new acquisition fades rapidly. The gold loses its luster. The exotic goods become commonplace. The luxury becomes normal. And once it's normal, it's not pleasurable anymore. It's just what you have. And you start looking for something else, something more extreme, something that might finally be the thing that satisfies. But there is no such thing. Because the problem isn't insufficient quantity. The problem's that material possessions can't fill a spiritual void. You're trying to solve the wrong kind of problem with the wrong kind of solution. Solomon's beginning to suspect this, but he's going to push the experiment even further. He's going to try pleasure in its most intense form, women. And this is where the story becomes most controversial and most revealing. The text says Solomon had 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines. Let's be clear about what this means. In ancient Near Eastern culture, many royal marriages were political alliances. Kings married their daughters to other kings to seal treaties, establish peace agreements, create trade relationships. This was standard diplomatic practice. So some of Solomon's marriages are political. Pharaoh's daughter, for instance. That marriage sealed an alliance between Israel and Egypt. The Moabite and Ammonite wives probably represented similar diplomatic arrangements. But that doesn't explain all 1,000 women. That's excessive even by ancient standards. Even kings who routinely practiced political marriage didn't usually have harems this large. This is beyond diplomacy. This is Solomon systematically pursuing sexual and romantic pleasure. The text doesn't hide this. It says he loved many foreign women. Loved. Not just married for political reasons. Loved. He was attracted to them. He desired them. He pursued them. What's he testing? Whether romantic love can provide lasting satisfaction. Whether sexual pleasure can fill the void. Whether having access to every beautiful woman in the known world can finally be enough. And in some ways, Solomon's the perfect person to test this. Because most men who desire many women can't have them. They're limited by circumstances, by money, by opportunity, by social norms. So they can fantasize that if only they could have more women, they'd finally be satisfied. Solomon removes all those limits. He can have any woman he wants. He has unlimited resources to acquire them. He has power that makes refusal difficult. He has fame that makes him attractive. He has everything working in his favor. So if anyone can be satisfied by sexual variety and romantic conquest, it should be Solomon. But here's what he discovers, and he documents it in both the Song of Solomon and in Ecclesiastes. The intensity of romantic love is real and powerful. When he writes in the Song of Solomon, "How beautiful you are, my darling. Oh, how beautiful." And "My beloved is mine and I'm his." That's genuine passion. That's real emotional and physical intensity. But it doesn't last. The initial euphoria of new love fades into routine. The intense sexual attraction becomes familiar. The woman who was mysterious and exotic becomes known and ordinary. And then you're looking for the next one. The next woman who might bring back that initial intensity. The next romantic conquest that might finally be the one that satisfies permanently. But it never is. Because the problem isn't that you haven't found the right woman yet. The problem's that romantic and sexual pleasure, like all pleasure, is inherently temporary. It's intense for a moment, then it fades. And no amount of repetition makes it permanent. In fact, repetition makes it worse. The 1,000th romance is less intense than the 100th, which is less intense than the 10th, which is less intense than the first. Each repetition diminishes the impact. You need more and more stimulation to feel the same level of excitement. And Solomon, with 1,000 women, has exhausted the cycle completely. He's experienced every variation. He's felt the full intensity of new love 1,000 times. And he's watched it fade 1,000 times. So when he writes in Ecclesiastes, "I found one upright man among 1,000, but not one upright woman among them all," he's not primarily making a statement about gender. He's expressing his bitter disappointment with the entire project. He's saying he searched thoroughly, 1,000 women, and found none of them provided what he was searching for. It's not that women are worse than men. It's that what he needed couldn't be found in any human being, male or female. He was looking for something that could fill his existential emptiness, and romantic love, even when multiplied 1,000 times, couldn't do it. This is actually more depressing than if he just had one disappointing marriage. Because he tested the hypothesis thoroughly. He had access to the most beautiful women in the world. He experienced every variation of romance and sexuality. He gave pleasure its best possible chance to satisfy. And it failed. Not because he didn't do it right, but because it can't work. Because pleasure, by its nature, is temporary and unable to provide permanent meaning. Now, modern readers want to condemn Solomon for his excess. 1,000 women? That's exploitative, objectifying, wrong. And from our contemporary perspective, it absolutely is. The power dynamics were terrible. Many of these women probably didn't have real choice. The treatment of them as collectibles rather than individuals is dehumanizing. But here's the thing. Solomon would agree with you. He's not defending his choices. He's not writing this section of Ecclesiastes as celebration. He's reporting what he discovered through his experiment, and what he discovered is that it doesn't work. He writes, "I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my labor, and this was the reward for all my toil. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done, and what I'd toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. Let's read that carefully. I denied myself nothing. This isn't hyperbole. He literally had the resources and power to pursue every pleasure imaginable. Wine, entertainment, achievement, wealth, women, music, food, luxury, comfort, everything. My heart took delight in all my labor. So it wasn't joyless. He experienced genuine pleasure. The satisfaction was real in the moment. While he was building, while he was acquiring, while he was experiencing new romances, there was real enjoyment. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done, everything was meaningless. Past tense again. The pleasure was real while it lasted, but it didn't last. And looking back at it from the perspective of completion, it all feels empty. This is the second great crisis in Solomon's philosophy. Pleasure doesn't provide lasting satisfaction any more than wisdom does. The difference is that wisdom shows you this truth immediately through intellectual understanding, while pleasure has to be exhausted through experience before you recognize its emptiness. Contemporary psychology calls this hedonic adaptation. We get used to whatever pleasure we have. What seems amazing initially becomes normal. We need more and more stimulation to feel the same level of satisfaction. It's a treadmill that speeds up but never arrives anywhere. But there's something even deeper going on here. Solomon's discovering what Augustine will later describe as the God-shaped hole in every human heart. We're made for infinite satisfaction, for permanent joy, for complete fulfillment. But everything finite, no matter how pleasurable, leaves us unsatisfied because it can't fill an infinite void. You can try filling the void with finite pleasures: wine, sex, food, entertainment, achievement. But it's like trying to fill the ocean with a bucket. No matter how much you pour in, the ocean's still empty. Not because you haven't poured in enough, but because finite quantities can't fill infinite space. Solomon's discovering this the hard way. He's poured in more finite pleasure than any human before him. He's had access to more, experienced more, achieved more, and the void's still there, still empty, still aching. This is why his testimony's so powerful. He's not some ascetic who rejected pleasure without experiencing it and then claimed it was empty. He's not some moralist making theoretical arguments about why pleasure's wrong. He actually did it all. He had everything. He denied himself nothing. And from that position of complete experience, he reports back, it doesn't work. The pleasure's real, but it's insufficient. It provides temporary relief, but not permanent satisfaction. It distracts from the void, but doesn't fill it. This raises an uncomfortable question for our contemporary culture. We're basically doing what Solomon did, just on a smaller scale. We pursue pleasure systematically. We deny ourselves nothing we can afford. We accumulate experiences and possessions. We chase novelty and stimulation. We're constantly looking for the next thing that might finally satisfy us. And Solomon's saying, we're wasting our time. He's already run this experiment to completion. He had more resources, more access, more opportunity than we'll ever have. And his conclusion is that it's meaningless, a chasing after wind. You might object, well, Solomon was obviously depressed. Maybe normal people can find satisfaction and pleasure if they don't overthink it. But that's exactly the point. Solomon wasn't depressed when he started. He became depressed after exhausting pleasure and finding it empty. The pursuit of pleasure didn't cure his sadness from wisdom. it added a second layer of sadness. The sadness of recognizing that even pleasure doesn't deliver what it promises. That the thing everyone thinks will make them happy actually leaves you more empty than before. Here's the psychological complexity that makes this so devastating. While you're pursuing pleasure, you can distract yourself from existential questions. You can stay busy with experiences, relationships, achievements. You can fill your schedule with activities and stimulation. You can avoid thinking about whether life has meaning by keeping yourself entertained. This is what Pascal later called diversion, the way humans avoid confronting the void by keeping themselves constantly diverted with pleasure and activity. But eventually, if you're honest, you'll have a moment like Solomon's. You'll survey everything you've done and realize you're still empty. The pleasure was real, but it didn't fill the void. It just postponed the moment when you have to confront the void directly. And that moment, when it comes, is devastating. Because you can't go back to innocence. You can't pretend pleasure will satisfy once you've discovered it won't. You're stuck with the knowledge that nothing you can acquire or achieve or experience will be enough. You can try to suppress that knowledge. You can pursue more pleasure, chase new experiences, find new distractions. But the knowledge is still there, lurking beneath every pleasure, poisoning every enjoyment with the awareness that this too will fade. This too will prove insufficient. This too will leave you empty. This is why Solomon's testimony is so important. He's warning us not to waste our lives chasing what he's already proven doesn't work. He's saying, I've been to the end of that road. I've exhausted every pleasure available to humans, and there's nothing there. It's a dead end. Don't waste your finite time on earth discovering what I can tell you now. But most people don't listen. They think they'll be the exception. They think if they just get enough pleasure, if they just find the right combination of experiences, if they just achieve the right goals, it'll finally be satisfying. Solomon had more than enough. He had everything. He found the right combination. He achieved every goal. And it wasn't satisfying. That should terrify us because it means the project we're all pursuing, the project of finding happiness through accumulation and achievement, is fundamentally impossible. Not just difficult, impossible. Because what we need can't be obtained through any amount of human effort or any quantity of human pleasure. But Solomon's not done with his investigation. He's discovered that wisdom leads to sorrow, and pleasure leads to emptiness. Now he's going to examine whether life itself has any meaning when death makes everything temporary. And this is where his philosophy becomes truly dark, where he faces the one truth that no amount of wisdom or pleasure can overcome. The truth that destroys every human project and makes every human achievement ultimately futile. The truth of mortality. Part 3. The shadow of death. Why nothing matters if everything ends. Now we reach the absolute center of Solomon's existential crisis, and it's captured in one devastating observation that runs throughout Ecclesiastes like a funeral dirge. Everyone dies. The wise and the foolish, the righteous and the wicked, the rich and the poor, the king and the slave, all die. Same fate, same end, same return to dust. Solomon writes, "For the wise, like the fool, will not be long remembered. The days have already come when both have been forgotten. Like the fool, the wise too must die." Think about what he's saying. He's the wisest man alive. He's built monuments that'll last centuries. He's written proverbs that'll be remembered for millennia. And his conclusion is that it doesn't matter because he'll die and be forgotten like everyone else. The exclamation point is crucial. Like the fool, the wise too must die. There's shock in that statement. There's outrage. There's the betrayal of discovering that wisdom provides no protection against death, no exemption from mortality. He continues, "So I hated life because the work that's done under the sun was grievous to me. All of it's meaningless, a chasing after wind." Stop. Read that again. Solomon, who has everything, who's achieved everything, who's experienced everything, hates life. Not because life's been cruel to him. It hasn't. Not because he's failed. He hasn't. Not because he lacks anything. He doesn't. He hates life because he can see clearly that death makes it all temporary, that everything he's built will crumble, that everyone he's known will die, that all memory of him will eventually fade, that the universe will continue as if he never existed. This is more than depression. This is facing the implications of mortality directly, without the psychological defenses most people use to avoid thinking about it clearly. Most people live in what Ernest Becker called denial of death. We know intellectually that we'll die. We can acknowledge it as abstract fact, but we don't let ourselves feel the full weight of that reality. We distract ourselves. We focus on immediate concerns. We tell ourselves it's far in the future. We avoid thinking about it deeply. Solomon can't avoid it. His wisdom won't let him. He sees through every distraction to the fundamental reality that everything ends. Every achievement, every relationship, every pleasure, every moment of happiness, all of it temporary, all of it erased by death. He writes one of the most haunting passages in Scripture. What do people gain from all their labors at which they toil under the sun? Generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun sets and hurries back to where it rises. The wind blows to the south and turns to the north. Round and round it goes, ever returning on its course. All streams flow into the sea, yet the sea is never full. To the place the streams come from, there they return again. Notice what he's observing. Natural cycles continue. The earth remains. The sun rises and sets. The wind blows. Streams flow to the sea. Everything in nature is cyclical, repetitive, eternal. But humans? We come and go. We're temporary. We're like grass that grows in the morning and withers in the evening. We're like vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes. And not just humans. Everything humans build is temporary. Solomon writes about visiting the remains of previous civilizations, seeing their great works crumbling into dust, and realizing his works will do the same. There's no remembrance of people of long ago, and even those who are yet to come won't be remembered by those who follow them. This is existential vertigo. This is standing at the edge of an abyss and looking down into nothingness. You build, you create, you achieve, and eventually it's all gone. Not just forgotten, but as if it never existed. Your life makes no permanent mark on reality. Everything you do, everyone you love, every moment you experience, death swallows it all. Time erases it all. Eventually, it's as if none of it ever happened. Now here's where Solomon's philosophy becomes truly radical. He's not just observing that death exists. Everyone knows that. He's arguing that death retroactively makes life meaningless. Think about the logic. If something has value, it should persist. If it's meaningful, it should matter permanently. But if death erases it, then it never really mattered in the first place. Temporary significance is ultimately no significance at all. It's like spending your entire life building an elaborate sandcastle on the beach, knowing the tide's coming in. You can create something beautiful and complex. You can invest enormous effort and creativity. But the tide doesn't care. It'll wash it all away as if you never built anything. And Solomon applies this ruthlessly to every category of human endeavor. To wisdom. The wise person has eyes in their head, while the fool walks in the darkness. But I came to realize that the same fate overtakes them both. Then I said to myself, the fate of the fool will overtake me also. What then do I gain by being wise? I said to myself, this too is meaningless. The wise person and the fool both die. Same fate. So what's the advantage of wisdom? None, ultimately. Wisdom might make your life better while you're alive, but death makes wise and foolish equal. To righteousness, there's something else meaningless that occurs on earth. The righteous who get what the wicked deserve, and the wicked who get what the righteous deserve. This too, I say, is meaningless. Not only do the righteous and wicked both die, but sometimes the righteous suffer while the wicked prosper. If there's no ultimate justice, if death is the end for everyone regardless of how they lived, then righteousness has no advantage. Morality becomes arbitrary. To labor. What do workers gain from their toil? I've seen the burden God has laid on the human race. He's made everything beautiful in its time. He's also set eternity in the human heart. Yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. Humans have eternity in their hearts. We sense that things should last forever, that our lives should have permanent significance. But we can't achieve permanence through our labor. Everything we build is temporary. There's a cruel mismatch between what we desire, permanence, and what we can achieve, temporality. Every category of human endeavor, when examined in light of death, becomes meaningless. Not temporarily meaningless, but permanently meaningless. Because the end is the same, regardless of how you live or what you achieve. This is what philosophers call nihilism. The recognition that if there's no permanent meaning, then there's no real meaning at all. Temporary meaning is just pretend meaning, a game we play to distract ourselves from the void. And Solomon's experiencing this not as philosophical speculation, but as lived reality. He's the richest, wisest, most powerful person of his era, and he's discovering that none of it provides protection against the fundamental meaninglessness of existence when death is the final word. Let me give you a concrete example of how this works. Imagine you're building a business. You pour 20 years of your life into it. You sacrifice time with your family. You work 16-hour days. You overcome obstacles. You achieve success. Your company becomes profitable, respected, influential. And then you die. Maybe you pass the business to your children, but they sell it. Or they run it into the ground. Or it gets bought by a competitor and dismantled. Within a generation, your life's work is gone. Was it meaningless? Solomon would say yes, ultimately. Because the end is the same, whether you built a successful business or sat in a cave doing nothing. Both of you are dust. Both of you are forgotten. Both of you made no permanent difference. You might say, but I provided jobs for people. I created value. I improved lives. True, temporarily. But those people also died. And the value you created was eventually lost. And the lives you improved still ended in death. If you trace it far enough forward, every effect you had dissipates into nothingness. Your business fails or is sold. the jobs disappear. The products you made are discarded or decay. Eventually, even memory of your company vanishes, and the universe continues exactly as it would have if you'd never existed. This is what Solomon means by chasing after wind. You're pursuing something that can't be grasped, that slips through your fingers even as you think you're holding it. Contemporary existentialists like Camus would say Solomon's facing the absurd, the contradiction between our need for meaning and the universe's indifference to our existence. We want our lives to matter permanently, but reality offers only temporary significance that death erases. And the absurd isn't just a philosophical problem, it's lived anguish. It's the feeling of working on something important and then remembering that it doesn't ultimately matter. It's the experience of loving someone deeply and then realizing they'll die and be gone forever. It's achieving a goal and then feeling empty because the achievement can't survive your death. Solomon goes even further with this. He says, "So I hated life, because the work that's done under the sun was grievous to me. All of it's meaningless, a chasing after wind. I hated all the things I'd toiled for under the sun, because I must leave them to the one who comes after me. And who knows whether that person will be wise or foolish. Yet they'll have control over all the fruit of my toil, into which I've poured my effort and skill under the sun. This too is meaningless." This is another layer of meaninglessness. Not only will you die, but you can't even guarantee that what you've built will be used wisely. Your life's work might be destroyed or corrupted by someone who doesn't understand its value. Solomon's speaking from experience here. He's built an empire, and he knows his son Rehoboam is going to inherit it. And he can already see that Rehoboam doesn't have the wisdom to maintain it. Everything Solomon built will likely collapse within a generation because his successor lacks judgment. And he's right. After Solomon dies, Rehoboam's foolishness causes the kingdom to split in two. Civil war destroys what took decades to build. The United Kingdom of Israel never reunites. Solomon's worst fears are realized. But this raises a troubling question. If Solomon could see this coming, why did he build anything at all? Why not just give up and enjoy whatever pleasures are available in the moment? Why work on projects you know will fail? Why create things you know will be destroyed? Here's where Solomon's philosophy becomes truly dark. He actually considers whether suicide might be preferable to living with such clear-sighted awareness of meaninglessness. He writes, "So I declared that the dead who'd already died are happier than the living who are still alive. But better than both is the one who's never been born, who hasn't seen the evil that's done under the sun." Read that again, slowly. He's saying non-existence is preferable to existence. That being born is the real tragedy. That consciousness itself is a burden when you're conscious enough to see clearly what consciousness shows you. This is as close to advocating for suicide as Scripture gets. And it's coming from the wisest man who ever lived. Someone who had every advantage, every pleasure, every achievement, everything that's supposed to make life worth living. What does this tell us? That wisdom, when separated from faith, when left to pure reason examining pure existence, leads to despair. Not because the reasoning's wrong, but because the conclusions are unbearable when there's no transcendent hope. Solomon's logic is actually impeccable. If death makes everything temporary, and temporary things don't have permanent value, then nothing you do matters permanently. If nothing matters permanently, then life is meaningless. If life's meaningless, then existence is worse than non-existence. The only way to escape this logic is to find something that death can't erase, something permanent that gives permanent meaning to temporary existence, something that survives beyond the grave and justifies the suffering of existence. And this is where Solomon's journey takes a turn. Not a complete reversal, not a neat resolution, but a shift from pure despair to something more complex. A recognition that maybe, just maybe, there's something beyond under the sun that changes the equation. Part 4. The fear of God. When meaning can't be found, only received. After Solomon surveys everything, after he concludes that wisdom, pleasure, achievement, and life itself are all meaningless under the sun, he writes something that seems to contradict everything he's said. Now, all has been heard. Here's the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it's good or evil. Wait, after declaring everything meaningless, after hating life, after saying non-existence is better than existence, suddenly he's telling us to fear God and keep commandments. Is this a contradiction? Is Solomon abandoning his conclusions? Did some later editor add this to make the book more palatable? Or is something more subtle happening? I think Solomon's discovered something crucial. He's discovered that meaning can't be found through human effort, human wisdom, or human pleasure. But that doesn't mean meaning doesn't exist. It means meaning has to come from outside the system. Let me explain what I mean by that. Solomon's been examining life under the sun. That phrase appears 29 times in Ecclesiastes. Under the sun means from a purely human perspective, within the closed system of earthly existence, without reference to anything transcendent. And from that perspective, he's absolutely right. Everything is meaningless. Death does erase everything. Human wisdom does lead to sorrow. Pleasure does fade. Achievement does crumble. There's no way around these conclusions if you limit yourself to under the sun perspective. But what if there's something beyond under the sun? What if there's a perspective from which temporary things participate in permanent meaning? What if death isn't the end? What if there's a God who sees and judges and remembers? What if your temporary existence matters to an eternal being? Then everything changes. Not because the facts change. You still die. Achievements still crumble. Pleasures still fade. But because the framework changes. You're not living just under the sun. You're living under God's eye. Your temporary existence participates in permanent significance because it's seen and judged and valued by someone eternal. This is what fear God means in Solomon's philosophy. Not terror, though there's an element of that, but primarily recognition. Recognizing that you're not the center of reality, that there's something infinitely bigger than you, that your life matters not because you made it matter, but because God made it matter. Solomon writes, He's made everything beautiful in its time. He's also set eternity in the human heart, yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. This passage is crucial for understanding Solomon's conclusion. Let's unpack it carefully. He's made everything beautiful in its time. Notice, in its time. Not permanently beautiful, not timelessly beautiful, but beautiful in its proper moment. There's a time for planting and a time for harvesting, a time for birth and a time for death, a time for building and a time for tearing down. Everything has its season, And in that season, it's beautiful. The problem isn't that things are temporary. The problem's that we want them to be permanent. He's also set eternity in the human heart. This is the source of our dissatisfaction. We have an intuition, a sense, a deep conviction that there should be permanent meaning. That's why we're so disturbed by death, by transience, by meaninglessness. We're made for something more than under-the-sun existence. But here's the cruel paradox. Yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. We have this intuition of eternity, this hunger for permanence, but we can't achieve it through our own efforts. We can't figure it out from within the system. We can't reason our way from temporary to permanent. The gap's too wide. This is why Solomon's earlier pursuit of wisdom failed. He was trying to understand everything from a human perspective. He was trying to make sense of life under the sun without reference to anything beyond the sun. And you can't do that. You can't find permanent meaning within a temporary system. It's like being a character in a novel, trying to understand the author without the author revealing himself. You can analyze the story endlessly, study every word, understand every plot point, but you'll never reach the author by those means. The author exists outside the story. The only way to know him is if he chooses to make himself known. So Solomon's conclusion isn't that his earlier observations were wrong. They weren't. Life under the sun is exactly as meaningless as he described. His conclusion is that you can't live purely under the sun. You have to live with reference to what's beyond the sun. And what's beyond the sun is God. Not God as philosophical abstraction, not God as cosmic force, but God as judge, as giver of meaning, as the one who sees and remembers what humans forget. This is why the conclusion says God will bring every deed into judgment. That's not primarily threat, though there's warning in it. It's promise. It means nothing's forgotten, nothing's lost. Every act of kindness, every moment of love, every sacrifice for what's right, God sees it all and will account for it all. Death can't erase what God remembers. Time can't corrupt what God preserves. Human forgetfulness can't nullify what God values. Your temporary actions have permanent significance because they're witnessed by an eternal being. Your brief life matters infinitely because it matters to someone infinite. Your small choices echo into eternity because they're made under the eye of the eternal. This is the only exit from Solomon's despair. Not that temporary things become permanent. They don't. But that temporary things participate in permanence through God's knowledge and judgment of them. Think about how this works. You perform an act of kindness that no one sees. No one thanks you. No one remembers. You die, and the person you helped dies, and everyone who knew about it dies. From a purely human perspective, it's as if it never happened. But if God saw it, if God valued it, if God will judge based on it, then it matters permanently. It exists in God's memory, which is eternal. It factors into God's evaluation of your life, which has eternal consequences. The temporary is held within the permanent. The finite is known by the infinite. The mortal is seen by the immortal. And that changes everything. But here's what makes this complicated. What makes Solomon's conclusion less than fully satisfying. He doesn't seem to find this entirely comforting. Even after reaching this conclusion, there's still a note of sadness, still a weight of resignation in his writing. He says, "Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind." Duty, not joy, not fulfillment, not deep satisfaction. Duty. It's like he's saying, look, I can't make sense of life through wisdom, or pleasure, or achievement. The only conclusion that prevents complete despair is to fear God. So that's what I'm recommending. Not because it makes everything wonderful, not because it solves all problems, but because it's the only alternative to meaninglessness. This is actually more honest than most religious writing. Solomon's not promising that faith will make everything make sense, or that obeying God will be deeply satisfying in every moment. He's saying it's what you should do, because the alternative, living purely under the sun, without reference to anything beyond, is unlivable. It's almost pragmatic. If God exists and judges righteously, then you should fear him and obey him, because that's the only way your life can have permanent significance. If he doesn't exist, then nothing matters anyway. So you might as well act as if he does, on the chance you're wrong about his non-existence. This sounds like Pascal's wager, developed 26 centuries before Pascal formulated it. But it's not quite the same. Solomon's not making a calculated bet based on probability. He's recognizing that humans need transcendent meaning to bear existence, and God's the only available source of that meaning. We can't generate permanent significance from temporary materials. We can't create eternal meaning through mortal actions. We need something beyond ourselves, something that doesn't die, something that remembers when everyone else forgets. Contemporary philosopher Charles Taylor talks about this in terms of fullness. We have an intuition that life should be full, meaningful, significant. We're constantly searching for that fullness, but we can't generate it from our own resources. We need something that comes from beyond us, something transcendent that fills the void we can't fill ourselves. Solomon discovered this through bitter experience. He tried generating fullness through wisdom. It failed. Through pleasure, it failed. Through achievement, it failed. The only thing left is receiving meaning from God, rather than creating it yourself. But this creates a new problem, and Solomon's aware of it. How do you fear God properly? How do you keep his commandments when you've already discovered that human nature is corrupted and human wisdom is limited? Solomon doesn't fully answer this. He points toward the solution, but can't quite grasp it. He knows humans need God, but he doesn't know how to bridge the gap between what humans are and what they should be. Throughout Proverbs, he writes about fearing the Lord as the beginning of wisdom. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. But what does it mean practically? How do you actually fear God when you're surrounded by fools? When you're struggling with your own foolishness? When wisdom itself has made you sad? Solomon gives some practical advice. He talks about keeping your vows to God, not making rash promises, being careful in worship. Guard your steps when you go to the house of God. Go near to listen, rather than to offer the sacrifice of fools, who don't know that they do wrong. Don't be quick with your mouth. Don't be hasty in your heart to utter anything before God. God is in heaven, and you're on earth, so let your words be few. This is wisdom about worship. Don't treat God casually. Don't make promises you won't keep. Don't babble in prayer, thinking quantity of words matters. Recognize the infinite distance between you and God. Approach with reverence and fear. But this is external guidance. It tells you how to act, but doesn't tell you how to be transformed internally. It's like someone giving you a map to a destination, without giving you the vehicle to get there. Solomon can describe what righteousness looks like. He can articulate what fearing God means behaviorally. But he can't explain how to actually become righteous when you're fundamentally broken. How to actually keep commandments when you're naturally inclined to break them. How to actually fear God properly when you're constantly distracted by earthly concerns. This gap between what we should be and what we are, between the standard and our ability to meet it, is the ultimate problem. And Solomon's aware of it, but can't solve it. He writes in Proverbs, "Who can say, 'I've kept my heart pure, I'm clean and without sin'?" The implied answer is, no one. Nobody can claim perfect righteousness. Everyone falls short. But if everyone falls short, and God judges based on keeping his commandments, and the only alternative to God's judgment is meaninglessness, then where does that leave us? In need. In desperate need. In need of something beyond ourselves to bridge the gap, to provide what we can't provide, to transform us in ways we can't transform ourselves. Solomon's philosophy shows what human wisdom alone can discover, that we need God. But it can't show how to successfully connect with God when we're broken and He's holy, when we're temporary and He's eternal, when we're sinful and He's righteous. His failure to answer this fully becomes part of His legacy. He shows us the problem so clearly that we can't ignore it. And by showing us that human solutions don't work, He prepares us to look for divine solutions. Part 5. The Tragedy of Solomon. When wisdom doesn't equal virtue. Now we have to confront the most disturbing part of Solomon's story. The part that makes his philosophy personal and tragic rather than just theoretical. The part that shows the ultimate limitation of wisdom. Solomon didn't live according to his own wisdom. He wrote, "Fear God and keep His commandments," but he didn't keep them consistently. He wrote about the emptiness of pleasure, but he pursued pleasure anyway, even knowing it wouldn't satisfy. He wrote about fools who repeat their folly, but he repeated his own folly. He wrote about wisdom as life's highest pursuit, but wisdom didn't make him wise in practice. The biblical text is devastating in its honesty. It doesn't hide Solomon's failure. It doesn't excuse it or explain it away. It just states it plainly. King Solomon, however, loved many foreign women besides Pharaoh's daughter. Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonians, and Hittites. They were from nations about which the Lord had told the Israelites, "You must not intermarry with them, because they will surely turn your hearts after their gods." Nevertheless, Solomon held fast to them in love, despite knowing better, despite writing proverbs about the dangers of seductive women, despite his wisdom telling him this would end badly, despite God's explicit command not to do this. He knew, and he did it anyway. That's the tragedy in a single sentence. Perfect knowledge, imperfect execution. The text continues. As Solomon grew old, his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart wasn't fully devoted to the Lord his God, as the heart of David his father had been. He followed Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and Molech, the detestable god of the Ammonites. So Solomon did evil in the eyes of the Lord. He didn't follow the Lord completely, as David his father had done. Stop and feel the full weight of this. The wisest man who ever lived ends his life in idolatry. The man who wrote about fearing God ends up worshiping false gods. The man who built the temple to Yahweh builds altars to pagan deities. The text says he built a high place for Chemosh, the detestable god of Moab, and for Molech, the detestable god of the Ammonites. these weren't just different gods. These were gods that required child sacrifice. Moloch worship involved burning children alive as offerings. Solomon, who wrote about justice and righteousness, built altars for gods whose worship included murdering children. The man who judged between two women fighting over a baby ended up facilitating the burning of babies as religious sacrifice. How does this happen? How does someone with perfect wisdom make such catastrophic choices? How does the wisest man alive end up doing the most foolish things? Here's what I think Solomon discovered, and it's more terrifying than any of his other conclusions. Wisdom doesn't prevent sin. Knowledge doesn't create virtue. Understanding what's right doesn't give you the power to do what's right. This is the final crisis in Solomon's philosophy, the one that completes and validates everything else he wrote. He can see clearly what he should do. His wisdom shows him the right path. His knowledge tells him the consequences of wrong choices. His understanding illuminates every moral situation, but his desires pull him in a different direction, and he follows his desires despite knowing better. St. Paul will later describe this same experience in Romans. I don't understand what I do. For what I want to do, I don't do. But what I hate, I do. And if I do what I don't want to do, I agree that the law is good. As it is, it's no longer I myself who do it, but it's sin living in me. For I know that good itself doesn't dwell in me, that is, in my sinful nature. For I've the desire to do what's good, but I can't carry it out. That's Solomon's story. Perfect understanding, perfect desire for what's good, but imperfect execution, because human nature is corrupted at a level deeper than wisdom can reach. Why does this happen? Because humans aren't purely rational beings. We're not computers that automatically implement the correct program once we understand it. We're creatures of desire, habit, weakness, and corruption. Solomon desired pleasure despite knowing pleasure's empty. He desired power despite knowing power's temporary. He desired women despite knowing they'd turn his heart from God. He desired the approval of his foreign wives despite knowing that approval would cost him his relationship with God. And his desires won. Not because he didn't know better. He knew better than anyone. But because knowing isn't enough. Understanding isn't enough. Wisdom isn't enough. You need transformation, not just information. You need power to do what's right, not just knowledge of what's right. You need your desires themselves to be changed, not just your understanding of which desires are good. Let me be specific about how Solomon's fall happened, because the details matter. He didn't wake up one day and suddenly decide to worship Moloch. It was gradual. It was a series of small compromises that seemed reasonable at the time. First, he married foreign women for political reasons. That seemed wise. It secured alliances. It prevented wars. It expanded Israel's influence through diplomacy rather than military force. Smart strategy. But God's law said, don't marry foreign women because they'll turn your heart after their gods. Solomon probably thought, that won't happen to me. I'm too wise for that. I can marry them for political reasons while maintaining my devotion to Yahweh. So the marriages happened, and at first it seemed fine. His devotion to God didn't waver. He still led worship. He still offered sacrifices. He was managing it successfully. But then his wives wanted to worship their own gods. That seemed reasonable. Why should they abandon their ancestral religions just because they married him? Religious freedom is important. Tolerance is wise. He's not going to be one of those narrow-minded tyrants who forces everyone to worship his way. So he allows them to worship their gods. He might even attend occasionally out of politeness, out of diplomatic courtesy. He's not really worshiping. He's just being present, showing respect for their customs. But then they want proper temples, proper altars, proper worship facilities. They can't properly honor their gods without the right infrastructure. And it seems mean to deny them. He has the resources. Why not build them what they need? It doesn't mean he's worshiping these gods. He's just accommodating his wives' needs. So he builds the altars, the high places, the temples to foreign gods. And maybe he's present at some of the ceremonies, not participating exactly, just observing, just being supportive. And then, imperceptibly, he's participating. He's offering incense. He's bowing. He's speaking the prayers. Maybe he tells himself it doesn't mean anything. Maybe he tells himself he's just going through the motions. Maybe he tells himself he still really worships Yahweh in his heart. But his heart's been turned, exactly as God warned, exactly as Solomon knew would happen. Each small compromise led to the next. Each reasonable accommodation led to deeper involvement. The slope was slippery, and he slid down it despite seeing every step clearly. This is how wisdom fails. Not through ignorance, but through rationalization. You convince yourself that your exception is justified, that you can handle what others can't, that you're smart enough to avoid the consequences that affect everyone else. But you're not. Nobody is. The wisest man who ever lived wasn't. If he couldn't maintain faithfulness despite perfect knowledge, what hope does anyone else have? This raises the most troubling question in Solomon's entire story. If the wisest man alive couldn't live rightly despite perfect knowledge, what hope does anyone else have? What's the point of wisdom if it doesn't prevent you from doing foolish things? What's the point of knowledge if it doesn't make you virtuous? The answer seems to be, there's no hope through wisdom alone, no hope through knowledge alone, no hope through human effort alone. You need something beyond wisdom. You need transformation at a level wisdom can't reach. You need your nature changed, not just your understanding improved. Solomon's failure actually completes his philosophical project. He tested whether wisdom leads to good living. And the answer, demonstrated through his own life, is no. Wisdom shows you what's good, but it doesn't make you able to choose it consistently when the cost is high or the temptation is strong. The biblical text records God's response to Solomon's failure. Since this is your attitude, and you haven't kept my covenant and my decrees, which I commanded you, I'll most certainly tear the kingdom away from you and give it to one of your subordinates. Nevertheless, for the sake of David your father, I won't do it during your lifetime. I'll tear it out of the hand of your son. Even in judgment, there's mercy. God doesn't destroy everything immediately. He gives Solomon time, gives him the rest of his life to repent. But the consequences are coming. The kingdom will be torn apart because Solomon's wisdom didn't translate into faithfulness. We don't know if Solomon repented before he died. The biblical text doesn't tell us. Some Jewish traditions say he did, that he wrote Ecclesiastes as a confession late in life, acknowledging his failures and trying to warn others not to repeat his mistakes. Other traditions say he died in his sin, that the book of Ecclesiastes is his expression of despair at having wasted his God-given gifts on emptiness and idolatry. The ambiguity might be intentional. The text leaves us with the question rather than the answer. It forces us to wrestle with what Solomon's story means rather than giving us a neat conclusion. But here's what the story clearly teaches. Regardless of whether Solomon repented, wisdom isn't enough. Knowledge isn't enough. Understanding what's right doesn't give you power to do what's right consistently. This isn't pessimism. This is realism. It's looking clearly at what human nature is actually like when you strip away the comfortable illusions. Solomon had every advantage: maximum wisdom, maximum wealth, maximum power, maximum pleasure, maximum achievement. He had everything humans think they need to live well. And he failed. Not in small ways, in catastrophic ways. He ended up facilitating child sacrifice after starting his reign by wisely saving a child from being cut in half. That's not a random failure. That's comprehensive moral collapse despite comprehensive wisdom. That's proof that something in human nature is broken at a level wisdom can't fix. What does this mean for us? It means we should be humble about our own ability to live rightly. If Solomon, with perfect wisdom, couldn't do it consistently, we certainly can't. We shouldn't trust our own understanding, our own strength, our own capacity for moral living. We need help. We need something beyond ourselves. We need transformation that comes from outside, not improvement that comes from within. Solomon's failure points toward what Christian theology will later call grace. The recognition that we can't save ourselves through effort or wisdom, that we need God to do for us what we can't do for ourselves. That transformation has to be a gift because we can't achieve it through work. But Solomon himself can't articulate this fully. He knows the problem. Humans are broken, and wisdom doesn't fix the brokenness. But he can't fully grasp the solution. He can point toward needing God, but he can't explain how to successfully connect with God when you're fundamentally corrupted. His life becomes an object lesson in human inability. The wisest man proves that wisdom isn't enough. The richest man proves that wealth isn't enough. The most powerful man proves that power isn't enough. The man who experienced every pleasure proves that pleasure isn't enough. Nothing is enough. Not human resources, not human ability, not human understanding. All insufficient. This is simultaneously the most depressing and most important conclusion in his philosophy. Depressing because it means we can't save ourselves. We can't fix ourselves. We can't become what we should be through our own efforts. Important because recognizing we can't save ourselves is the first step toward looking for salvation elsewhere. As long as we think we can do it through wisdom or effort or moral improvement, we won't seek outside help. Only when we're convinced of our inability do we become open to receiving what we can't achieve. Solomon's story ends ambiguously. We don't know his final spiritual state. We don't know if he died reconciled to God or alienated from God. The text doesn't say, and that ambiguity leaves us with uncomfortable uncertainty. But maybe that's the point. Maybe we're supposed to be uncertain, because Solomon's story is really our story. We're all trying to live wisely while constantly failing. We all know better than we do. We all make choices we know are wrong while we're making them. The question isn't whether Solomon was worse than us. The question is whether we'll recognize in his failure our own inevitable failure. Whether we'll stop trusting in our own wisdom and start looking for something beyond ourselves. Because that's what Solomon's entire philosophy points toward, even in its darkest moments. The insufficiency of everything human. The need for something divine. the impossibility of fixing ourselves, and the desperate necessity of being fixed by someone else. Part 6. The Legacy of Vanity. Why Solomon Still Matters. So what do we do with Solomon? What do we learn from a man who had everything, understood everything, and concluded that everything's meaningless? What do we gain from studying someone who ended his life in failure despite perfect wisdom? Actually, we learn more from Solomon than we would from someone who succeeded perfectly. Because success stories lie. They make you think you can achieve what they achieved if you just follow their formula. They create false hope. Solomon's failure tells the truth that wisdom isn't enough, that human effort isn't sufficient, that you can have every advantage and still end up broken. That truth is valuable, maybe more valuable than any success story, because it prevents you from wasting your life pursuing what can't work. First, we learn humility about human limitations. We learn that wisdom has boundaries, that knowledge has limits, that human effort can't overcome human nature. This is actually liberating once you accept it. If Solomon, with maximum advantages, couldn't figure it all out and live perfectly, then you don't have to beat yourself up for failing. You're not worse than Solomon. You're just human like he was, broken like he was, limited like he was. The pressure's off. You don't have to be perfect. You can't be perfect. Even the wisest man couldn't be perfect. So you can stop pretending you're capable of what you're not capable of and start admitting you need help. Second, we learn to be suspicious of simple solutions. Our culture is full of them. Follow these 10 steps to happiness. Adopt these 7 habits to success. Think these thoughts, and you'll be fulfilled. Solomon tried all the formulas. He had the resources to test every hypothesis about human happiness. He pursued wisdom systematically. He pursued pleasure exhaustively. He pursued achievement comprehensively. He tried everything anyone's ever suggested might make life satisfying. And his conclusion is that none of them work permanently. Not that they're bad. They're not. Not that they don't provide any satisfaction. They do. But they don't solve the fundamental problem of human existence. They're temporary solutions to permanent problems, and temporary solutions don't last. That doesn't mean you shouldn't pursue wisdom or virtue or meaningful work or healthy pleasures. You should. They make life better while you're alive. They're good things. But it means you shouldn't expect those pursuits to solve everything. You shouldn't think that if you just get wise enough, achieve enough, experience enough, you'll finally be satisfied. Solomon proves you won't. He had more of everything than you'll ever have, and it wasn't enough. Third, we learn that facing reality honestly is more valuable than comfortable delusions. Solomon could have written reassuring proverbs telling people that wisdom leads to happiness, and righteousness leads to success, and hard work leads to prosperity. Some of his proverbs do say that, describing the general pattern. But in Ecclesiastes, he's ruthlessly honest about the exceptions, about the darkness underneath the patterns, about what life looks like when you strip away comforting illusions. He could have hidden his failures. Ancient kings usually did. They commissioned inscriptions celebrating their victories and omitting their defeats. They created propaganda portraying themselves as righteous and successful in everything. Solomon does the opposite. He admits his failures. He documents his disappointments. He confesses his despair. He lets future generations see his brokenness. That honesty is valuable even when it's disturbing. Maybe especially when it's disturbing. Because false comfort prevents you from seeking real solutions. If you believe wisdom will make you happy, you'll keep pursuing wisdom, even when it's making you miserable, thinking you just need more of it. Solomon says no, wisdom doesn't make you happy, so stop expecting it to. Look elsewhere for happiness. Look beyond, under the sun, for what can't be found under the sun. If you believe pleasure will satisfy you, you'll keep chasing pleasure even when each new experience leaves you emptier than the last. Solomon says no. He already tested pleasure to its absolute limit, and it doesn't satisfy. Stop wasting your life on what he's already proven doesn't work. This is the gift of his negative conclusions. He maps the dead ends so you don't have to waste decades discovering them yourself. He tests the hypotheses so you can learn from his experiments rather than repeating them. Fourth, we learn that human life needs transcendent meaning to be bearable. This might be Solomon's most important insight. He demonstrates that if you limit yourself to under-the-sun perspective, if you look at life purely from human viewpoint without reference to anything beyond, life becomes unbearable. The only way to bear existence is to have reference to something beyond existence itself, something that doesn't die, something that sees and values and remembers when everyone else forgets, something permanent that makes temporary things meaningful by holding them in permanent memory. This doesn't prove God exists, but it shows what's at stake in the question. If there's no God, then Solomon's right. Everything's meaningless, and non-existence is preferable to existence. His despair is the only honest response to godless reality. If there is a God who sees and judges and remembers, then temporary existence can participate in permanent meaning. Then your brief life matters infinitely because it matters to someone infinite. Then death isn't the final word. You have to choose which framework you'll live within. And the choice has massive consequences for how you experience reality, how you make decisions, how you endure suffering, how you relate to others. Fifth, we learn that the human heart wants something we can't provide for ourselves. Solomon calls it eternity in our hearts. Augustine will later call it a God-shaped hole. Pascal will call it an infinite abyss that can only be filled by something infinite. Different language, same insight. We're made for something more than finite pleasures can provide. We hunger for something more than finite achievements can deliver. We need something more than finite wisdom can grasp. We want permanent significance. We want to matter forever. We want death to not have the final word. We want our lives to make a difference that lasts beyond our lifetimes. We want justice for wrongs that are never righted in this life. We want love that survives beyond the grave. But we can't provide any of this for ourselves. We can't make ourselves matter permanently through our own efforts. We can't create eternal significance through temporary actions. We can't generate infinite meaning through finite resources. We need someone beyond us to grant us significance. We need to be seen and known and valued by someone who doesn't die. We need to participate in something larger and more permanent than ourselves. This is actually the foundation of human dignity. If humans matter only because other humans choose to value them, then value is arbitrary and temporary. What one person values, another can devalue. What one generation honors, another can dishonor. There's no stable ground for worth. But if humans matter because God made them and values them, then their worth is grounded in eternal reality. It's not subject to human opinion or historical change. It's permanent because God is permanent. Solomon's philosophy, for all its darkness, actually points toward this higher ground. He doesn't fully reach it himself. He's still half in despair, even at the end. But he shows why we need it. He demonstrates what happens when you try to live without it. He proves that every alternative to transcendent meaning leads to unbearable meaninglessness. Contemporary culture's in basically the same position Solomon was. We've tried wisdom. Scientific knowledge exceeds anything Solomon had. We've tried pleasure. Entertainment and stimulation are more accessible than ever. We've tried achievement. We're building things Solomon couldn't imagine. And we're discovering what Solomon discovered. It's not enough. Depression rates climb, despite increasing wealth. Suicide rates increase despite medical advances. People report feeling empty, despite having more stuff and more options than any previous generation. The technology's different. The culture's different. But human nature is the same. And the fundamental existential questions remain the same. Does life have meaning? Why do we exist? What happens after death? How should we live? What should we value? Solomon would say, I told you 3,000 years ago. I already ran these experiments. Wisdom doesn't satisfy. Pleasure doesn't fulfill. Achievement doesn't last. Wealth doesn't fill the void. You're repeating my mistakes, and you'll reach my conclusions. But what's the alternative? Solomon points toward fear of God and keeping commandments. But he also demonstrates through his own life that you can't do that successfully through willpower and wisdom alone. Knowledge of what's right doesn't create ability to do what's right. So we're left with a question rather than an answer. We need something beyond ourselves. But how do we access it? How do we connect with transcendent meaning when we're trapped in temporary existence? How do we bridge the gap between what we should be and what we are? Solomon doesn't fully answer this, but his failure to answer becomes part of his legacy. He shows us the problem so clearly that we can't ignore it. And by showing us that human solutions don't work, he prepares us to look for divine solutions. This is why Solomon's story doesn't end with him. It continues through the wisdom tradition of Israel, through the prophets who called people back to God when they wandered, through the psalmists who wrestled with the same questions Solomon asked, through the development of Jewish theology that tried to make sense of suffering and justice and God's relationship with humans. And ultimately, Christians would say, through Jesus, who claimed to be wisdom incarnate, who said he was the way, the truth, and the life, who promised abundant life not through human achievement, but through divine grace, who offered transformation not through information, but through relationship with God. Whether you believe that or not, Solomon's story shows why people keep looking for something like that. Because his experiments proved that nothing else works, that nothing human provides the permanent meaning that human hearts crave, that we need saving from outside ourselves because we can't save ourselves. Part 7, the final word, living with Ecclesiastes. So how do you actually live with Solomon's conclusions? How do you get up in the morning and do your work and love your people and pursue your goals when you know it's all temporary and death makes everything equal in the end? Solomon actually gives some practical advice amid his philosophy. And it's surprisingly simple. Not transcendent, not transformative, just practical wisdom for living in a world where ultimate meaning is elusive. He says, go, eat your food with gladness, and drink your wine with a joyful heart, for God has already approved what you do. Always be clothed in white, and always anoint your head with oil. Enjoy life with your wife, whom you love, all the days of this meaningless life that God has given you under the sun, all your meaningless days. For this is your lot in life and in your toilsome labor under the sun. Notice what he's not saying. He's not saying these simple pleasures make life meaningful. He just called life meaningless twice in this passage. But he's saying, enjoy them anyway. Take pleasure in simple things, even though they don't solve the fundamental problem. Eat your food with gladness. It's just food. It doesn't last. It provides temporary nourishment and temporary pleasure. But it's good. So enjoy it. Don't eat mechanically. Don't rush through meals thinking about other things. Actually taste the food. Experience the pleasure. Be glad. Drink your wine with a joyful heart. Not to get drunk, not to escape, but to experience the legitimate pleasure that God built into creation. The joy of good wine, shared with good people, in good moments. Be clothed in white. In Solomon's culture, white clothing symbolized celebration and joy. He's saying, don't go around in mourning clothes all the time. Don't express your awareness of life's meaninglessness through perpetual gloom. Dress well. Present yourself well. Participate in life's celebrations. Anoint your head with oil, another symbol of joy and celebration. Take care of yourself. Don't neglect your appearance or health just because ultimate meaning is elusive. You're still here. You might as well take care of the body you've been given. Enjoy life with your wife. This is the most important one. Human relationships, especially marriage, are where meaning is experienced most intensely, even if it can't be grasped philosophically. Love the person you're with. Enjoy the companionship. Don't waste your limited time together being miserable about existence's ultimate meaninglessness. This is wisdom. You don't have to solve the problem of existence to enjoy breakfast. You don't have to understand ultimate meaning to love your spouse. You don't have to have everything figured out to take satisfaction in your work. Solomon's saying, yes, it's all temporary. Yes, death makes everything equal. Yes, from an ultimate perspective, nothing you do matters permanently under the sun. But you still have to live. And since you have to live, you might as well enjoy the good things available while you're alive. This isn't hedonism. He already rejected pure pleasure-seeking. This is something more subtle. It's acceptance that you're human, finite, limited, and that's okay. You don't have to be God. You don't have to understand everything. You don't have to create permanent meaning through your own efforts. You just have to be faithful in your limited sphere while you're here. Do your work well, even though it won't last forever. Love your people, even though you'll all die eventually. Create things, even though they'll crumble someday. Not because these acts are ultimately meaningful by themselves, but because this is what humans are supposed to do while we're here. He also says, whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. For in the realm of the dead, where you're going, there's neither working, nor planning, nor knowledge, nor wisdom. This is interesting. He's not saying work makes life meaningful. He's saying you should work wholeheartedly, precisely because your time's limited. You won't be able to work after you die, so work now while you can. It's almost existentialist. There's no cosmic meaning to your labor, but the labor itself is what humans do. So do it well while you're able. Don't hold back, waiting for perfect understanding or complete certainty about meaning. Just do what's in front of you with full commitment. This is actually freeing once you accept it. You don't have to make your work justify your existence. You don't have to find a job so meaningful that it solves all existential questions. You just have to do your work faithfully while you're here, whatever that work happens to be. Solomon also emphasizes enjoying what you have rather than striving anxiously for what you don't have. Better one handful with tranquility than two handfuls with toil and chasing after the wind. This directly contradicts our culture's constant push for more. More success, more money, more achievement, more stuff, more experiences. The assumption is always that more is better, that you should maximize what you have. Solomon says no. One handful with peace is better than two handfuls with stress and anxiety. Why? Because you can't take any of it with you anyway. Everyone comes naked from their mother's womb, and as everyone comes, so they depart. They take nothing from their toil that they can carry in their hands. If you're going to leave with nothing, regardless of how much you accumulate, then why stress yourself accumulating more? Why not be content with enough? Why not prioritize peace over possessions? This is profoundly countercultural. We're taught that ambition is virtue, that wanting more is healthy, that striving for success is what life's about. We respect people who work 80 hours a week to build empires. We admire endless striving. Solomon says that's foolish. It's chasing wind. You're exhausting yourself for something you can't keep, sacrificing present peace for future wealth that death will make meaningless anyway. Better to have less and be peaceful than to have more and be anxious. Better to work reasonable hours and enjoy your family than to work endless hours and neglect relationships. Better to be content with enough than to always hunger for more. But here's where Solomon's advice becomes truly challenging. He doesn't just say, accept limitations and enjoy simple pleasures. He also says, remember that God will judge everything. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it's good or evil. This transforms everything. If there were no judgment, you could just do whatever you want, since nothing matters anyway. Live for pleasure. Pursue your interests. Don't worry about morality, because it's all arbitrary anyway. But if judgment's real, then everything you do matters, even if it seems temporary. Your hidden thoughts matter. Your secret actions matter. Your motivations matter. Not because other humans will know or remember, but because God knows and remembers. This creates what we might call lived meaning, even within Solomon's framework of cosmic meaninglessness. Your life might not change the course of history. Your achievements might not outlast your generation. But each act of kindness, each moment of faithfulness, each choice for good over evil, God sees and will account for. That doesn't make the temporary permanent, but it means the temporary matters more than it seems. It's not ultimately meaningful in human terms, but it's relatively meaningful within God's accounting. It's not permanent significance, but it's real significance recognized by someone permanent. This is as close as Solomon gets to resolving his crisis. He can't make life permanently meaningful from a human perspective under the sun, but he can point toward a divine perspective beyond the sun, from which temporary things have lasting significance because they're witnessed and judged by someone eternal. It's not a complete solution. Solomon still sounds sad, even when giving this advice. There's still weight, still resignation, still the shadow of mortality hanging over everything. But it's enough to keep living. enough to justify doing good rather than evil, enough to prevent complete despair. And maybe that's all philosophy can do. Maybe it can't give you ultimate meaning tied up in a neat package with a bow on top, but it can point you toward the only source of ultimate meaning. It can show you what doesn't work, so you stop wasting time on dead ends. It can prepare you to receive what you can't create for yourself. That's Solomon's legacy. Not answers, but better questions. Not solutions, but clearer understanding of the problem. Not certainty, but honest acknowledgement of uncertainty. He ends Ecclesiastes without resolving everything. The book ends with the command to fear God and keep commandments, followed immediately by the reminder that God will judge. And that's it. No final chapter where everything makes sense. No epilogue where Solomon reports achieving peace. Just the unresolved tension between human limitation and divine requirement. And maybe that's the most honest thing anyone can do. Maybe pretending to have it all figured out would be less valuable than showing us a genius who struggled with the same questions we struggle with and didn't find easy answers. Solomon's story says you're not alone in your doubts. The wisest man who ever lived had them too. You're not failing if you can't make sense of everything. Even Solomon couldn't. You're not weak if you need something beyond yourself. Everyone does, even if they don't admit it. The question isn't whether you can figure it all out alone. You can't, and Solomon proved that definitively. The question is whether you're willing to admit you can't and look for help beyond yourself. That's where Solomon leaves us, at the edge of human capability, pointing toward divine possibility, unable to bridge the gap himself, but showing us clearly why the gap needs bridging. Conclusion: the eternal question. So here we are, 3,000 years after Solomon died, still reading his words, still wrestling with his questions, still feeling the weight of his conclusions. Everything's meaningless, a chasing after wind. Wisdom leads to sorrow. Pleasure fades. Achievement crumbles. Death makes everything equal. Fear God and keep His commandments, even though wisdom shows you can't, and death makes you wonder why you should. It's the most depressing philosophy ever written, and yet people keep reading it. Generation after generation returns to Ecclesiastes, reads these dark conclusions, and finds something valuable in the darkness. Why? What do we gain from studying someone who concluded that everything's meaningless? We gain honesty. We gain permission to acknowledge what we secretly feel but rarely say. That life is hard, that meaning is elusive, that suffering is real, that death terrifies us, that we don't have everything figured out. We gain company in our struggle. Solomon struggled with the same questions. The wisest man who ever lived faced the same darkness. We're not alone. We're not uniquely broken. We're human, and these questions are part of being human. We gain warning. Solomon tested every path to happiness and found them all wanting. He wasted decades discovering what he could have avoided if he'd listened to God from the beginning. Don't repeat his mistakes. Don't expect wisdom or pleasure or achievement to solve problems they can't solve. We gain humility. If Solomon couldn't figure it out and live perfectly despite maximum advantages, neither can we. We need to stop trusting our own wisdom and start looking beyond ourselves for what we can't provide ourselves. And we gain a question. The question that won't leave us alone, that demands an answer even when we don't want to answer it. That splits reality in half. Is there something beyond under the sun? Is there a God who sees and judges and remembers? Does temporary existence participate in permanent meaning? Or is Solomon's despair the final word? You have to answer. Not answering is still answering. It's choosing to live as if there's no God, as if temporary is all there is, as if death is the final word. Solomon would tell you that choice leads to the despair he documented, that if you live purely under the sun, you'll end where he ended, hating life, calling it meaningless, wishing you'd never been born. The alternative is to fear God, to live with reference to something beyond the sun, to act as if temporary things matter because they're witnessed by someone eternal. That's a leap of faith. It requires trusting what you can't prove, committing to what you can't fully understand, betting your life on a God you can't see. But Solomon's philosophy shows us that every alternative leads to despair. If there's no God, then his conclusions are correct. Everything's meaningless, and existence is worse than non-existence. The only way out is up. The only exit from meaninglessness is transcendence. The only answer to under the sun, futility, is beyond the sun, meaning. Solomon points us toward that answer without being able to fully grasp it himself. He shows us why we need it without being able to explain how to obtain it. He demonstrates that human wisdom reaches a limit where something beyond human has to take over. And 3,000 years later, we're still at that same limit, still needing what Solomon needed, still looking for what he was looking for. His story doesn't end with him. It continues in everyone who reads Ecclesiastes and recognizes themselves in its pages. Everyone who's pursued wisdom and found sorrow. Everyone who's exhausted pleasure and found emptiness. Everyone who's achieved success and felt hollow. Everyone who faces death and wonders if anything matters. That's all of us. We're all Solomon's heirs. We all inherit his questions, even if we don't inherit his wisdom or wealth. The question is, what we'll do with those questions. Will we ignore them, distract ourselves, pretend they don't matter? Will we despair, like Solomon did, concluding that everything's meaningless and giving up? Or will we do what Solomon finally did? Acknowledge that human solutions are insufficient and look beyond ourselves for what we can't create ourselves. That's the choice Ecclesiastes forces on us. Not a comfortable choice, not an easy choice, but an unavoidable choice. Solomon lived and died 3,000 years ago, but his question lives on, and it's waiting for your answer. What will you choose?